Much has been said, too much actually, has been said about race in recent weeks. We have in this country a huge problem. Race mongers, race baiters, race haters. Many of them serve in high public office. Many of them lead the Democrat Party. Many of them have hijacked civil rights organizations or have created their own and have hijacked the civil rights movement. The civil rights movement is not about race baiting. It's not even about one ethnic group or one racial group or another. It's about liberty and justice and due process and equality, not economic equality, not outcomes equality, but equality under the law. I said the other day that the Democrat Party has hijacked the civil rights movement. They've redefined it. The fact is, the Democrat Party needs racism. It needs it in reality. It needs to concoct it if it has to, but it needs it. And as long as they're a Democrat Party, it will exist in truth or in fiction or both. The Democrat Party has gone from defending slavery, defending segregation, obstructing civil rights, to now claiming to embrace civil rights, to promote civil rights, and accuses the Republican Party of doing all the things that the Democrat Party has done and does do. There's an excellent piece at Town Hall by Mona Charen, and she sums it up beautifully. Many issues we know, but the way she sums it up is worth repeating, particularly after 2 to 3 weeks, the outrageous media and the endless propaganda blaring through our radios and TVs, coming from senior Democrat Party officials and Democrat Party supporters dressed up as civil rights leaders and politicians. And she points out, and I had this audio yesterday, and I decided not to play it because Charles Rangel is an unethical, certified unethical, tax avoider, and race baiter. And I said, what the hell? That's wasting 2.5 minutes of airtime on that jerk. But she points out the unsinkable Rangel appeared on C-SPAN over the weekend. Why unsinkable? The House of Representatives censored the New York Democrat in 2010 by a vote of 333 to 79. When that body was still majority Democrat, for violating 11 ethics rules and bringing discredit to the House of Representatives, quote unquote. The New York Times called it a staggering fall for the senior senator, Democrat, but fall schmall. He's since been reelected and will retire at his leisure. So while talking to Brian Lamb, Rangel dropped a few falsehoods as casually as cigar ash. This is one I want to get at. This isn't to pick on Rangel, she writes. He's just illustrative. His assertion that the Republican and Democratic parties changed sides, quote unquote, in the 1960s on civil rights, with white racists leaving the Democrat Party to join the Republicans, has become conventional wisdom. Now, folks, you hear this all the time yourself. These are lies. These are myths, and they are perpetuated. And you need to stand up to this. She says it's utterly false and should be rebutted at every opportunity. It's true that a Democrat President, Lyndon Johnson, shepherded the 1964 Civil Rights Act to passage. But who voted for it? 80% of Republicans in the House voted yes, as against 61% of Democrats who voted no. Excuse me. I blew that. 87% of Republicans voted yes to only 61% of Democrats who voted yes. In the Senate, 82% of Republicans favored the law, only 69% of Democrats. And among the Democrats who voted against it, Al Gore Jr., Robert Byrd, and William Fulbright. Al Gore Sr., Robert Byrd would become majority leader of the Democrat Party. William Fulbright, Bill Clinton's primary mentor. The Republican presidential candidate in 1964 also opposed the Civil Rights Act. Barry Goldwater had been an enthusiastic backer of the 1957 and the 1960 Civil Rights Acts, both overwhelmingly opposed by Democrats. He was a founding member of the Arizona chapter of the NAACP. He hired many blacks in his family business and pushed to desegregate the Arizona National Guard. And he had a good faith objection to some features of the 1964 Act, writes Charen, which he regarded as unconstitutional. Goldwater was no racist. The same cannot be said of Fulbright, on whom Clinton bestowed the Medal of Freedom. Fulbright was one of 19 senators who signed the Southern Manifesto defending segregation. I've written about this at length myself, but I just want to repeat it. Okay, but didn't all the old segregationist senators leave the Democratic Party and become Republicans after 1964? No. Just one, Strom Thurmond. The rest remained in the Democratic Party, including former Klansman Robert Byrd, who became president pro tem of the Senate. Former racists of both parties renounced their old views. Kevin Williamson of National Review points out Johnson himself voted against anti-lynching laws and poll tax repeals as a senator. And neither party has a perfect record on racial matters by any stretch. But it is a libel to suggest that the Republican Party, the anti-slavery party, the party of Lincoln, and the party that traditionally supported civil rights, anti-lynching laws, and integration became the racist party after 1964. The so-called Solid South Democratic voting pattern began to break not in the 1960s in response to civil rights, but in the 1950s in response to economic development in the Cold War. Black voters in the North, who'd been reliable Republicans, began to abandon the GOP in response to the New Deal, encouraged by certain activists to, quote, turn Lincoln's picture to the wall. That debt had been paid, said Robert Vann. In the 1940s, the GOP garnered about only 25% of Southern votes. The big break came with Dwight Eisenhower's victories. Significant percentages of white Southerners voted for Ike, though the Democratic Party remained firmly segregationist, and though Eisenhower backed 2 civil rights bills and enforced the Brown decision by federalizing the National Guard. They also began to send Republican representatives to the House. So these Republican gains came not from the most rural and deep South regions, but from the newer cities and suburbs. If the new Southern Republican voters were white racists, one would have expected that Mississippi and Alabama and Georgia would have been the first to turn. Instead, as General Alexander notes in The Myth of the Racist Republicans, the turn toward the GOP began in Virginia, North Carolina, Texas, Tennessee, and Florida. Eisenhower did best in the peripheral states. And Alexander concludes, the GOP Southern electorate was not rural, nativist, less-educated, afraid of changers, concentrated in the Deep South. It was disproportionately suburban, middle-class, educated, young, non-native Southern, and concentrated in the growth points that were the least Southern parts of the South. The point is, folks, Rangel is peddling a libel, and Republicans should say so loudly and often. No, the Republicans didn't change places with the Democrats. Yes, the Democrats have rewritten history and have hijacked the so-called civil rights movement, which now attacks with a broad brush law enforcement, opposes the voting franchise by refusing to support efforts to ensure that only those who can vote will vote, and promotes massive big federal government, socialism and redistribution of wealth, and all those things that are anti-liberty, because that's what they are.